sliding scales. Because Henry and Neville were at the works, the engines had to help with the flying kipper too. It was a special train filled with boxes of fish to be taken to the markets at London and other places far away from the mainland. James didn't like the flying kipper. All those smelly vans, he complained one morning. You can't get the smell off your tender for weeks. I'm very fond of a good kipper, remarked his driver. You're welcome to it, retorted James. A right old misery today, aren't you? said his driver. You got out of the shed by the wrong door this morning, and no mistake. Now get a move on, or the Fat Controller will give you something to complain about. James grumbled dreadfully as the turntable turned towards him, and he puffed out of the shed to collect the flying kipper. On his way to the docks, James was still complaining. He puffed over bridges, through tunnels, and he even went around the same track where he had his accident. At last, James arrived at Brendam Docks where the flying kipper was waiting. The men wearing aprons were all in a hurry, filling up the vans full of crates of fish. Ugh, went James, wrinkling his nose as he was coupled to the vans. Just then, a forklift truck was in a hurry. It went racing down, trying to avoid a collision. It then dropped a crate full of fish and went smashing into pieces on the track. Splinters of wood from the broken box and fishes were everywhere. James shuddered as he closed his eyes. For once, James was right. The smell was not nice. Luckily there was plenty of time for the men to clean up the mess before James had to leave. The driver came over. You're lucky it didn't fall on you, he said, winking at the fireman. James shuddered again. The idea was too awful to think about. When the mess was cleaned up, James was ready to leave. The guard had already shown his green lamp, and James was just about to puff out of the docks with his heavy train when he could feel the heavy weight of the train pulling him back. The rails were slippery, and James tried to move, but it was no good. He couldn't go either forwards nor backwards. The rails were slippery. His driver and fireman had noticed it too. And before it could go on forever, the driver stopped James just in time to see what the problem was. Then they noticed how slippery the track was. Soon the men came with hoses to wash on to clear the tracks and to wash down each of James's driving wheels. James felt wet and uncomfortable, but his driver and fireman put sand on the rails to keep him occupied. When the problem was sorted, James was ready to leave with his train. It was getting very late, but James didn't care. He was so glad to be out of the docks that he wanted to go home, knowing that he was able to get rid of the smell of fish. When Neville and Henry returned from the works a few weeks later, they saw James back into the engine sheds, feeling very tired. The engines thought it would be very funny to tease James. "Well, James," said Henry, "I never thought you would pull the flying kipper again." Henry said, I thought you despised pulling the flying kipper," said Neville. "After all, you were meant to deliver fish, not slide with them." The other engines laughed and thought it was a great joke. James was in no mood to argue, although he was very happy to not be pulling the one train he despised the most.